Hello everybody, welcome back to episode 5 of my beginner VFX guide, where I introduce you to VFX and get you familiar so you can refine your skills, start your own career, get better at VFX for personal projects, whatever you want. This episode is going to be a little different today because I recorded the entire thing and the audio was completely scuffed because my other mic just wasn't working right. So we're going to do a voiceover today, so that is going to be different and weird, but we're going to try it out anyway. Maybe we'll like it more. So let's get into the project and see what we're looking at today. We're going to create a stylized rain effect using sub-emitters, particle systems, and just kind of basic shaders and particles. Okay, so the first thing we are going to do is go up to the plus, add a particle system, and we're going to want to add a ground plane as well so that our raindrops can have something to collide with as they hit the ground, and we can trigger different sub-emitters using that collision. Next up, we're going to create a new folder so we can keep all this nice and tidy and slot in our new materials and all that good stuff, shaders. We're not going to be making any new shaders. I'm just watching the playback here, remembering everything I just talked about. But yes, creating a new material, changing it to the particle shader that we created in a previous tutorial. Cannot remember which episode that was. Sorry about that. And then we will be applying that material to the particle system so we can get some raindrops made, moving it up in the air on the y-axis so that our raindrops can come down. We're going to want to turn on gravity and everything on those. First things first, we're going to do the color, get a nice blue teal kind of look. Very pretty, very nice, very stylized. In the renderer, we want to change these to a stretched billboard so that they can have some length to them like a raindrop does. Changing up the size here to get a good look. Eventually we're going to change this to get some variation, but just to start out, we're just setting a basic size. That looks pretty good. Nice job, Brandon. VoiceOver Brandon approves. Next up, we are changing the size or the shape of our emitter to a box. And we're going to be stretching that really long so that the raindrops can cover the majority of the plane as they come down. Right now they're inverted, flying to the heavens, but we'll be fixing that shortly. Changing it on the X, changing it on the Y, because it is rotated currently, because every particle system you make is rotated by 90 degrees. I don't know why they do it like that, but here we are. That's pretty good shape. Nice job recording, Brandon. VoiceOver Brandon approves. Perfect. Bringing it up in the air a little bit more. Resetting the transforms back to 0 so we can keep everything in the same spot in the project. Oh yeah, looking pretty good. Okay, next up we are adjusting the gravity and setting it to, looks like about 3. I don't know, this view window is pretty small here to be rewatching this and talking over it. But yes, turning up the gravity so that the raindrops fall to the ground. Now we are going to create a parent object to hold all of our effects underneath it, because it is good to do that, because you will be saving it as a prefab at some point. To save it as a prefab, you would just drag that parent down into your folders down at the bottom, and it would save it for you so you can place it later, hook it up however you want, whatever. So we're naming it Raindrops, and the parent's name is Rain Effects. Duplicating the raindrops because we're now going to make a little splash. You can use the same system because they're going to look similar to the raindrops, just going to be a little bit shorter. Changing the emitter to be smaller and a hemisphere right now, because when the particle hits the ground, we want the emitter to be small and not giant like it is up above. We want stuff to kind of fly outwards and downwards as a splatter would. So now we're going to add some gravity and speed. Well, we're adjusting the gravity to where it's not so heavy. And now we have some speed, so we're actually getting a bit of that out and down look. Adjusting our emission rate to 0 because we want this to be a burst instead. So as soon as that raindrop hits the ground, we are going to add a burst of drops that fly out. Yes, sir, but you're going to want to increase the gravity there because those are flying out a little far. This is very weird rewatching a video and then talking over it. Maybe you like it though, so I can have some actual clarity. I swear when I'm doing stuff in the moment, my brain can't always put the thoughts into words. Okay, so we switch it to a cone shape because that's going to give us more of an up and out kind of velocity trajectory that we like. Hemisphere wasn't really going to do that because it could launch it out the sides as well. So you definitely want a cone for something like this. We are adjusting the lifetime now. On a shorter lifetime than 1 second. And we're going to do a size over lifetime. And we want this to be an up-down curve. I love the up-down curves. Use them all the time. That's looking a little bit better because we don't want these to pop in out of nowhere. We want them to scale up quickly and then scale down as they fly outwards. Just making some micro adjustments here because I don't like the pivot of those, how they're rotating. They get kind of parallel with the ground. And I don't love that. God, speed it up, Brandon. Jeez. Okay, so we go down to the stretch billboard and we decrease the stretch a little bit to help with that trajectory because they were staying a little too parallel for too long. So these are a little bit shorter than what our raindrops are. We're moving the curve for the size of our lifetime over so that they scale up quicker, which helps them be nice and punchy. And we're leveling it back out at the bottom there of the curve. Yes, we're happy with that. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and set up the sub-emitter. That's going to trigger off of this collision data. Oh, we're on the collision right now. Turn on collision, decrease the radius really small so that it's accurate to when the particle hits. We don't want the bounce, obviously. We want them to just immediately be killed when they hit the ground so that they can spawn the sub-emitters. And it's currently set to collide with everything. If you were in a real game, you would probably have your ground planes and stuff be on different layers. So you could say just collide with the ground layer. So now we're saying lose all lifetime on collision. Changing that to death because we want this sub-emitter to be triggering on the death of the particle. Parenting the splatter particle system to the raindrops because when you use sub-emitters it needs to be parented. Then you just drag it on in just like that. And now what's happening is for some reason it just rotates your sub-emitters sometimes. So you just have to go up to the local transforms up at the top and rotate it on the X so it's facing upwards. I don't know why it does that. Unity does a lot of weird stuff that I don't understand sometimes. And then I goof around for a minute trying to figure out different ways that I could fix that. I'm sure there are many. Whatever I tried didn't work out. I thought the parent rotation was affecting the sub-emitter rotation, but it was not. So I changed that back. Don't you worry about that. Just me goofing around on the video. I'm really trying to make these shorter, but man, I just have to let all my thoughts get to me while I'm recording. I don't know what I was saying there. Okay, so we're going into our particle shader and we're adding a distortion feature for the puddle because it's going to be spawning puddles as it hits the ground as well as the splats. So we want to be able to distort our basic particle and create a bit of a puddly look, a nice blobby puddle. So lerp node, UV node, simple noise. We've done this before. A slider. Slider gets plugged into the time slot T. The noise gets plugged into the B and the UV gets plugged into the A because we are feeding noise into our UV channel. So we are distorting it. And that plugs into the UV of our particle. And we're going to start converting stuff into properties. Add a float to control the scale of the noise, so we can change that later. Convert it, name it distortion scale, and set the slider to be a property as well, and name that distortion. Save it, go back to the project. You don't have to create a new material because you can just duplicate it. It already has the shader applied to it. Rename it to Puddle. And then I like to create a plane sometimes and just apply my particle to it so I can adjust it before I hook it up to the particle system. So it's kind of annoying to adjust the material as you're seeing it before your eyes. It's better to just have it locked down in place. So we go into the new material. We use our new parameters here to distort our texture a wee bit. And decreasing the scale because I like the blobby stylized look. I didn't want it to be too grainy. Happy with that. I like that. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I keep changing it. Who knows? It's fine. It's good. It's good just like that. Stop. Sure. Yeah. Good look right there. All right. So then we want to create a new particle system. When you right click an object and you go to create something, it's going to parent itself to that object. So whatever you create is going to become a child of whatever you right-clicked. So we're going to rename this to Puddle. It's going to be a particle system that spawns our puddle. It's going to be a sub-emitter just like the other one is. Decrease the radius, set it to a sphere so it's spawning in the same exact place every time. Slide in the material for the puddle. I was trying to find the emitter here because I couldn't tell what was happening. Yeah, I haven't set it up as a sub-emitter yet, so it's spawning up there. So I double-click it to focus in on it. Trying to find my particles. There they are. Surprise! So we definitely don't want any speed because we want this to just appear in the same spot and keep that position. We turn on size over lifetime, do an ease out curve. Beautiful. That might be an ease in curve. Listen, I don't know and I'm not going to know. It's the one that goes up. It curves upwards. Changing the emission rate to be 0 and then setting a burst to be 1 because we want just one at a time spawning every time one of these raindrops dies. Changing the lifetime to be much less long. Good enough to start. And for our outro per particle, we are going to be... first we're going to copy paste the color. You can always right click those color bars and copy paste it to any other ones you want. Easy way to keep things nice and unified. You can select multiple just like that, holding Control or Shift. And you can paste the color to all of them. Sometimes Unity likes to think that they're different colors, but they're not. So if it shows up white with a little line in it, it thinks that they're different colors. Now we go into color over lifetime because we want this to fade out. We want it to grow big and then fade out. Could have done a dissolve here, but I think the fade out's fine. I actually kind of like it for the stylized look. I don't normally like fade outs, but for this, I think it looks nice. So here we're setting up some keys. You just click the top bar to set a key for the alpha. And then we drag the one on the far right all the way to 0 because we want it to fade out. And when here we're going down to the renderer and changing it from view to local space because we want to be able to have this flat parallel to the ground. Changing the rotation to 180 so that it is facing upwards and we're not seeing the back face. So we just have front faces on this, so we want it to face upwards. We're turning on the 3D rotation, start rotation, so we can randomize the rotation on the Z here, because we want these to be randomly rotated as they spawn. It helps them look more random and less, you know, if all of them face the same direction as soon as they spawned, it would look weird. You'd be able to tell. Decreasing that distortion back down because I didn't like that curve that was in the puddle. It was looking a little not organic, so just messing with the scale and distortion here. Perfect. Scrubbing through, checking it out. You should always be scrubbing through your stuff. I was checking out the particles, making sure they weren't camera facing, but they are not because they are stretched particles, and those will always kind of face the direction that they're moving. So you don't got to worry about changing it like we did for the puddle. Alright, so now we're going to slot this sub emitter for the puddle exactly the same way as we did the last one. And here I'm like, man, where are these things spawning at? I don't know what's going on. I'll tell you what's going on. They're spawning at the same exact height as the ground plane. So we're not seeing them because they're just like clipping through it. I try to up the position there on the Y. That doesn't work. You have to change the emitter position. I'm doing it on the Y here. That also doesn't work because it is not the Y I need to be worrying about. It's actually the Z. But I didn't think to try the Z, even though I know it's rotated. And here we are when I figure it out. We just want to bump up the Z on the emitter, the Z position. Bump it up a little bit so you can see the puddle. It's always tough sorting things with the ground plane, especially when you have like transparent decals and stuff on the ground. That's when sorting gets really annoying. But there we have it. I had to increase that a little bit. Now you can see it is spawning. We want to increase the size. That's too much size. Bring it back down. There we go. Looking a little bit better. It's slowly shaping up. God, maybe I should just do voiceover content. That way I can shorten these dang videos. Okay, so we are going in and making some adjustments to the splatter now because we want to add a little bit more speed. That's what's going on there. I didn't like how they were flying. We wanted to add some speed, add some more gravity, keep it punchy, keep it heavy, clean up quickly. Looking a little better. Set those not to loop because just in case they don't get cleaned up when the particle dies, when the last one dies, we don't want them to continue to cycle. So those are just bursts. We don't need those to loop. Increasing the gravity of the rain here to make it fall a little faster. Yep, that's looking pretty good. It's fine, quit tweaking it. I'm always tweaking everything. Increasing the length scale a little bit so I can have longer droplets. Oh yeah, here's what's happening here. So since I made those longer, on stretched particles, the pivot is kind of in the front, so the collision is happening in the front, and it's happening too far forward, so they were colliding underneath the plane. I just had to increase the collision radius a little bit so that they would hit before, they got too far down. So increase the collision radius a little bit on the raindrops since I made them longer. That's looking pretty good. Increasing the rain emission so we can have a nice thicker rain. I'm probably talking about how it looks good here. I'm going to increase the scale of the emitter, the box emitter that's dropping the raindrops, because I want it to cover more of the plane. Spread it out a little bit more. I'm going to add some randomness here to the lifetime of these splats, because it's looking a little uniform for me. Changing these puddles to scale up a little quicker because they're looking a little tame. Now I'm changing the speed at which they fade out because I don't like how quickly they were scaling up before fading out. It's a delicate dance. Generally speaking, you should just have it fade out just as it reaches its max size or just slightly before. But you still have to go in and slide stuff around and play with it, make sure it looks good. You want to keep it punchy too. You don't want it to last too long. Those are too big, silly. Here you go. That's a bit better. Back to the splatters. Changing up the count here because I'm still trying to push a little bit more randomization so that every single impact doesn't look the same. Do the drop down arrow and random between two constants so that you can have randomness in the bursts too. So we randomize it between 4 and 3 splatter droplets. Varying up the size of the puddles here. We want those to be a little random as well. Not too big, not too small, but just enough variation between their max sizes. Gonna add some size variation to the raindrops just to help them a little bit. Variation's good, randomness is good for pretty much any effect. Increase the size of the raindrops just a little bit more, the length scale. Turning off the mesh renderer on the plane. The mesh collider is still there, so the collision's still happening, but a little easier to see now without that gray, gross looking plane. I was looking there and I didn't like how the splatter was not colliding with the ground. And now you can see it pretty clearly now that it's just falling through. So I turn on collision on those. Set them to die and not bounce. Decrease the radius scale by a little bit so the collision is happening less soon. And now compensating with some extra speed. Since the particles are dying kind of fast when they're hitting the ground after they splatter, I want them to go up higher first. You get a nice bouncy looking impact. Much better. Look at that. I'm telling you, all these little micro adjustments add up, though. All right, what are we doing to the puddle here? Oh, yes, I did not like the fade out because the fade out was happening not quick enough. The puddles were reaching max size before they faded out, so adjusting that so they fade out a little quicker. You just click up top there. I explained it again to add in keys. But we're just scooting this one key along, trying to dial it in, make sure that it's fading out at a good time. Okay, that's good. And now we're going to bump up the size a little bit to account for that change we just made because they're fading out pretty fast now. So we want their max size to go up a bit. Yes, sir. It's looking pretty good. Just dialing it in. Everything's very visual in this field. You will also be constantly tweaking and adjusting things. I don't know what I'm talking about here. I was flinging my cursor around like a madman. The audio is so scuffed on these videos, I can't even hear what I'm saying. It's just like static, pure piercing static in my ears. What was I doing? I'm just watching the effect. What could I possibly be saying? That's so important. Hopefully it wasn't actually important. What am I doing? Making little circles with my cursor. Okay, now we're moving on to something. Okay, we were talking about adding some more randomization to the whole thing. So we're randomizing the gravity here of the splatters so that some fall quicker, just more little micro adjustments to make it look better. In the industry, we call this getting into the weeds. When you're sitting there adjusting things little by little, when there's no time and the schedule is packed, but you're sitting there tweaking between 0.1 and 0.2. All right, we're bringing it into the scene view here, the game view, taking a look at our product. And here I'm adding in some transparency just to really tie it all together. Rain just looks nice when you can see through it a tiny bit. Helps it not be so heavy on your eyeballs. The whole full opacity and color was throwing me off, so we added some transparency to everything by bringing down the alpha slider. And yeah, okay, VoiceOver Brandon signing off. Love you, bye. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the content. If you learned something new, leave a like, subscribe, do all the YouTube stuff. We kept it really simple today. We just used a couple particle systems and some very basic shaders, but that just goes to show you don't always have to overcomplicate it with crazy shader stuff. You can keep it simple and still create really nice effects. So thank you guys again for watching. I will see you next time. I'm going to keep pumping out these effects, these tutorials, this good stuff. Show your mom, show your dad, and I'll see you next time. Adios.